questions under Standing Order 36. I just want to note that we're due to adjourn tonight at 11 o'clock. So unless we stick to our time, every minute that Leaders' Questions runs over drives back the finishing time.
But I will go on until 11 o'clock.
You're very good. Thank you very much.
Just by way of reassurance to you.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Taoiseach, people woke up this morning to the latest Daft.ie rental report, and it confirms what everyone knows. The report shows the biggest hike in new rents since records began, a staggering surge of 14% in 1 year, a new grim record achieved on the watch of your government. What does it mean for hard-pressed renters? Well, across the state, it means an average monthly rent of over €1,600. In your own neck of the woods, Taoiseach, renters in Cork City will fork out over €1,700 a month. And get this, in Dublin, in this city, it means paying an average monthly rent of €2,258 or a staggering €28,000 a year. Have you read this report, Taoiseach? It is just off the wall. Who can afford to pay these insane amounts of money? Well, the answer is very few. Very soon, only the very well-off will be able to live in our cities. The teaching unions have today issued a statement. They say that our education system is at risk because schools find it increasingly difficult to recruit teachers because of this housing crisis. Working people can't afford to rent, working people can't afford to buy, and social housing delivery is nowhere near what's needed. And while this situation worsens, the Housing Minister, who is completely out of his depth, says that we don't have a housing emergency. The Taoiseach, wrongly, tells young people that the grass isn't greener and that they won't find lower rents abroad. Well, in fact, they will. And Taoiseach, you come in here every week and tell us that government housing policy is working. Well, it's not. The housing policy of this government should be about delivery, but instead we get denial, delusion and desperation. The record rent hike was entirely foreseeable. The writing was on the wall. We told you that the credit for renters included in your budget wasn't enough. We told you to really protect renters that you needed to ban rent increases too, and each time your answer was no, no, no. We also warned you, Taoiseach, repeatedly that your targets for the delivery of coast rental homes is too low, and in fact you're not even meeting those low targets. And now we hear that commencement rates for housing construction have dropped significantly, putting housing targets for next year in real jeopardy. And if that wasn't bad enough, a government memo confirms a housing underspend of almost €500 million in the middle of Ireland's worst ever housing crisis. That's scandalous, Taoiseach. Faoin rialtas seo, tá an ardú cíosa is mó riamh againn ach fós dearan an Tara O'Brien nach bhfuil éigeandála tithíochta againn. Tá sé in am I gcóir gníomh caithfí an rialtas cosca chur 3 bliana. You say that housing is the #1 priority for government, but the crisis in people's lives puts that claim to shame, Taoiseach. The government acts as if rip-off rents are a figment of people's imagination, and now the chickens of your inaction have come home to roost, and it's renters that pay a heavy price. Taoiseach, what is your answer to renters across Ireland who are fleeced by these outrageous rent hikes? Does this record rent increase now convince you that we do in fact have a housing emergency? And will you finally do what is necessary and ban rent increases for 3 years?
Thank you, Deputy McDonald.
Well, first of all, I don't want to engage in semantics with the Deputy, but the Deputy has seized, through the Chair, on the word emergency in the last 2 weeks as if it's some sort of magic word that will transform our housing output. But you're not the first to come up with the term emergency. At the launch of Housing for All in September 2021, when I launched it, I made it clear that when I talked about and referenced the whole of government approach, and I said, but, and I quote, the fact is that the social emergency that is our housing crisis cannot and will not be solved by one department on its own. The point being that we have treated this issue as an emergency from day one, in terms of the legislation we've passed, the initiatives that have been outlined. And a lot of what we're doing already is bearing fruit. And whilst for many people out there, they urgently need housing right now, many others have got housing. And in particular, if you take Laura, for example, a new tenant in Stepaside, struggling to find accommodation. I had to get my dad to help me because it was so expensive. But now with the cost rental scheme, it's a lot more affordable. It's been a great opportunity to move into an apartment that I can finally afford. Bernard was saying we had been looking since last November. It hadn't been going well. We wanted a 2-bed and so on. I didn't quite believe it could be true because of the price. I know at the moment what you can rent for in Dublin for a 2-bedroom apartment is about 2,000. We were ready to go for a 1-bedroom apartment that would cost at least 1,500. But here I was seeing a brand new apartment with 2 bedrooms for 1,264. Unlike other rental properties, you can stay for the long term. It's your home for as long as you want. That makes us really, really happy. We feel secure. And I go on with Courtney and Carberry Grange cost rental homes. Again, saying, having, the security that gives, and it's a beautiful home. Bernard, one of the first home scheme applicants, the first home process was so easy and fast. The scheme has really helped me, and the first home scheme experience is definitely one of the best service I've had. Now, what is significant about those schemes? Cost rental, the first home scheme. Yesterday I was in Shangana, the Land Development Agency. 600 housing, 600 houses we dug the sod for. 50% cost rental. Deputy, actions speak louder than words. Who opposed the Land Development Agency? Sinn Féin did. Voted against in this House. Voted against the prospect of 600 new homes that the council, all councillors, irrespective of party yesterday, celebrating, launching, because their role in making sure that site was available. Who opposed the first home scheme? The Sinn Féin party opposed the first home scheme. And time and time again, the Sinn Féin party has voted against and opposed significant housing developments across Dublin and across the country, from Oscar Traynor Road to Ballymastone, Donabate, right across. And Deputy McDonald herself has opposed. Deputy McDonald herself has opposed. Deputy McDonald herself has opposed. Over 1,600 homes in Clonliffe Road, about 177 apartments in Cabra, and about 79 apartments in Moore Street, in terms of the broader Moore Street development. Now, what I'm finding increasingly difficult, genuinely to understand, is how Sinn Féin reconciles its track record in this House and elsewhere in opposing such good initiatives that are now leading to cost rental homes, affordable homes and social homes. You opposed all of those, and yet in opposing all of those, you still declared the housing issue to be an emergency. Your two positions do not reconcile.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Time is up. Deputy McDonald.
Thank you, Count Corder. So, as you announced, just the latest report, Housing for All, there was an emergency and there is an emergency yet. And in fact, a more profound emergency as we speak today. House prices are up, rents are up, and very sadly on Friday we will hear again that the rates of homelessness are up. So how, Taoiseach, you try and dodge and evade answering questions by pointing to others as though you weren't the Taoiseach. And I know you've limited time left, but you are still the head of government. As though you weren't the government, as though you didn't carry the responsibility to tackle this emergency is quite astounding. There's less than 500 course rentals this year. That's it. That's it. And it's good news for those who have those tenancies. Let me state that plainly. But it's not enough. That's the fact. The report published this morning says it all. €28,000, the average cost of renting in this city in this year. And I have asked you the question, will you ban rent increases for the next 3 years, and you did not answer that question. I'd appreciate it if you would answer that question.
Thank you very much, Deputy.
Thank you.
So we have limited rents to 2% in every rent pressure zone. We've brought in a rent credit this year. You can put down your documents and don't be trying to create the propaganda and so on like that. But what I would say to you, Deputy, is this.
I hardly think they're propagandists.
What I would say to you, Deputy, there was a very good article written by an award-winning journalist, Sam McBride, recently in terms of Sinn Féin's housing performance in the north. And it's entitled, "Housing Crisis Will Not Be Solved by Sinn Féin's Cynical Populism." The last paragraph reads, "But Sinn Féin's storm record suggests that party populism is more fervently held than its grasp on the detail of what would actually improve the housing situation, and it is prepared to be deeply cynical in this area." And you are prepared to be deeply cynical in this area. And the reason,
Daft.ie,
the difference between the Sinn Féin party, which just simply wants to exploit the issue, and the government side is, we have a range of initiatives and actions taken. You take Help to Buy, for example. Help to Buy has had 35,000 people to own their own home.
Time is up.
Sinn Féin would have abolished that scheme. The first home scheme, and I reference how a person felt it was the best service they ever got, you opposed that scheme and you've proposed its abolition.
Okay.
You also opposed, in terms of the grants for restoring housing in rural areas in particular. I don't understand why, but up to 700 to 800 people have availed of that now and are availing of it.
Thank you very much.
All of those people would lose out if you had your way.
Thank you,
That's
Deputy
okay, I
Alana.
understand.
Please, deputies, Deputy Alana.